Hi everyone, this is Grace, and today I'm going to walk you through how I made this beginner ornaments set. So let's go. Trying something a little bit different here. This is sped up just shy of ×2. It's about 1.75. Just to mix things up. Normally I do it totally real time. So enough talking. Okay, but more talking. Now, this is from my beginner ornaments class. There is a sister class called Ornaments. And as you can see here, we're rocking a slightly different color palette for this Christmas class ornament set. I wanted to do something a little retro, a little funky. So I went with pink and lime green instead of red and green. Now, you could totally do this set with the classic red and green. Super easy to swap out. It's just 3 colors, which makes my heart unbelievably happy. And guess what? That topper that I'm about to do, I had the most brilliant idea to make all of the toppers with sanding sugar. If you've ever made ornament cookies, you know how hard it is to actually think of how to finish the topper. It's always in a different color. A lot of times it's gold or silver, which means like painting with luster dust, which is just a whole other thing. And obviously I didn't want to do that with a beginner class, but also it's just not a beginner skill level to do something like gold or silver. And I didn't want to have to make a whole other color just for this. So we're doing the sanding sugar, which I love so much. Also, obsessed with the color palette. I did find a couple of side notes on the colors. So for pink, I use a lemon royal icing, and maybe this just has to do with the acidity in my icing, but I do find that it's important to have a really fresh bottle of pink. Like every year, maybe even twice a year, I'll buy a new bottle, because when it gets older, it becomes less bright and vibrant, if that makes sense. And it becomes more like a salmon pink instead of this Barbie-esque pink. And I really wanted a Barbie pink for this. And then for the green, start out with any blue, just a tiny bit, either a royal blue or a sky blue, and then add lemon yellow, a lot of it, because you want it to be green heavily on the yellow side. That's what gives it the lime green color. You can also get lime green out of the bottle, but I tend to like to, when possible, just mix from common colors that you get anyway. And of course, I'm doing my classic one consistency approach here. You can see here with this, those circles, little tip here, start and end your circles in wet on wet like this in the exact same spot where you know you're going to pull through with a scribe. Because you see how I pulled through that and I completely masked the ugly beginning and end of that circle, which is inevitable. I think it's pretty much impossible to make that look perfect. This here is really giving retro vibes. Like I was thinking, the antique classic, whatever you call it, glass ornaments. That's where I got a lot of my inspiration from this set. My family's Christmas tree has a lot of glass ornaments, hand-me-downs from both of my grandparents. Not in pink and lime green though, in much more traditional colors, but I digress. Another important thing here is I'm not flooding all the way to the edge. As you can see, I'm giving my icing some space to spread out, which it is naturally going to do with that one consistency. That's going to help prevent overflood, which overflood can still happen if you have too much icing, if your icing's too thin, all that good stuff. This here is a really classic, just lines wet on wet situation. What I'm doing here though is the line pull-throughs with that scribe. I'm following the curve of the circle, which I really think helps to make it look more like an ornament, more like kind of 3D than 2D. I mean, it's not really 3D, but you get the point here, my friends, right? And that one's done. What else do we have? I think there are 7 cookies in total in this set. Sidebar, I started making gluten-free cookies. I got tested a couple months ago. I have gluten sensitivity, and I'm now adjusting my whole life to be gluten-free, including my cookie recipe. I'm still in the tweaking stages, so it's not something I want to officially share yet, but I have shared it with my email list if you are on that. This is a plaid design that I've definitely done before, but I switched it up a little and did it at an angle, which I think helps to give it that like funky retro vibe. I love doing 3D plaid like this. I think it just really takes it up a notch and creates a little more dimension when you're just using one consistency like this, which sometimes can be a little hard to do that. She's pretty. What else do we have? Okay, so for this one, we're marking off sections for flooding in sections. You could use an edible marker for that, but again, beginner class, don't want to have to require a bunch of extra stuff, and this is the only one where you need to mark off those sections. I will admit doing flooding in sections with one consistency is 100% harder than it is if you're doing a 2 consistency outline and flood, because when you do a 2 consistency, you can outline all the sections with a piping consistency and then fill them in. For this, you have to really eyeball that first section and the curve of the circle to get it to all match and line up prettily. But I think, with a little finessing, especially with the scribe, you can really get it to work. I did color my white icing with some white food coloring. I just feel like it really helps to make it pop. And for something like this, I definitely want the colors to pop. In between those sections, you want to let them dry for at least 10 minutes. The icing just needs to crust over, that's all, so that when you flood the next color next to it, it's not going to flood into the color next to it, if that makes sense. You want definition in between the colors. That's what I'm trying to say. For this next one, I think that this is the wavy lines one. Whenever you're doing a second layer with sanding sugar, you want to make sure that first layer is basically completely dry, or at least completely smooth to the touch, so that when you smother this cookie in sanding sugar, the sanding sugar is not going to stick to the base layer. And you'll see here in a second what I mean by what happens when it's dry enough. If it's not dry enough, the sanding sugar is not actually stuck to the icing. You just have to wait until the cookie is completely dry the next day to then take like a dry paintbrush and just gently brush off the excess sanding sugar. It just kind of sticks to the icing when it is ever so slightly humid. See, this is perfect. When it just all comes off when you dump the cookie, that is absolute perfection. And that's it, my friends. So Beginner Christmas Ornaments. The sister class is just called Christmas Ornaments. It still uses a similar color palette, but it adds red and anything else to it. I don't know. Anyway, I'm running out of time here. Thanks so much for joining me, and I can't wait to see you in the next one. Have a great day. Bye.